This video I'm going to talk about randomization algorithms for the traveling salesman. So just a quick revisit. The traveling salesman problem involves visiting all the cities in a particular, say, graph, or let's say on your list, and you want to visit each one exactly once, and you want to start and end in the same city or vertex. So this means you have a tour, which that's the definition of a tour, is you start in one city, you navigate throughout the rest, and you want to end up where you started. And the goal is to find the shortest, that is the optimal tour. So for example, A, B, D, C, A is one tour of this graph. It happens to be the optimal one. So let's review some other methods. We have brute force as an option, I guess. It will give you the optimal answer, but the problem is there's a factorial number of tours to consider because you have to look at all possible arrangements of the vertices. So that's a factorial number. That's in practice way too expensive to even consider doing. There's a greedy method I've covered in the past, 2-op swap, that involves making local edits to a best tour we found. This leaves a polynomial amount of time, about n squared, to give an approximate answer, so one that's pretty good but not necessarily optimal. The Held-Carp dynamic programming algorithm is a way of getting the optimal solution. I've made a video on this. That takes an exponential amount of time, though, so it's an improvement over n factorial, but it's not a lot because you go through all possible combinations rather than all possible permutations. So it's better. It gives you the exact answer, but still quite expensive. So now we're going to look at randomized algorithms. Can we do better just with some lucky guesses? Can we sort of basically use less time than these exact methods, but come up with an approximate answer that's maybe better than greedy? That's sort of the goal. I'm going to look at one particular, in the space of randomized algorithms, I'm going to look at something called genetic algorithms, which are sort of inspired by biology. One's called the Inver-Over operator for the TSP. So this is, there's a whole design space of genetic algorithms as well. This is just one in particular. It's relatively simple to do, so we're going to take a look at this. We're going to apply these randomized operations, and they're going to be randomized by, well, we're going to pick two cities somehow or two vertices, let's say, in our tour, and we're going to reverse some subsection of it to bring them together. So in this case, I start with G and I, reverse this subsequence, put G and I next to each other. So it's sort of in the same spirit as 2-op swap, but we're going to use it a little bit differently. And again, then we're going to start with I as our new starting vertex, pick D at random, bring the two together. So it's going to be our sort of swap or swap-like, or it's called a reverse operation or something like that. So big picture for the Inver-Over genetic algorithm is we're going to maintain this population, our collection of tours. So rather than the greedy method, which contains sort of the best so far, we're going to keep around a whole collection. And the idea here is we're going to try to mimic like biological genetic diversity. And in more of an optimization thought as well, we might have this collection of tours is really a collection of candidates. Like we have one that's best in here, we have maybe some ones that are suboptimal, but hopefully they're all sort of fairly different, and one of them will eventually lead to further and further improvements and get us hopefully really close to the optimal solution. So it's a way avoiding the pitfall of the greedy algorithm, which will hit a dead end and there's sort of no way out. By hopefully maintaining a population, we can kind of get around these sort of simple pitfalls. So there's going to be two variations of operations performed. So by operation, I mean something we're going to do to a tour to produce a new tour, like that swap I was just showing you. There's going to be variations of that. And the idea is we're going to apply these mutations and crossovers back and forth many times to a single tour, and then we're going to do that through each tour in the population, and this will produce a new generation, if you will, of tours. So mutation is, that operator is supposed to mimic just random genetic mutations. You get hit by a cosmic ray or something like that, it's flips something around inside. Hopefully that works out. For people it doesn't always, but hey, for tours it will, hopefully. And crossover. So crossover is essentially two tours getting together and making a baby tour. So the idea is you're sort of borrowing segments from one and copying them over into the segment or into the first tour, and that produces a new one which has sort of the qualities of both parents, if you will. Except it's not going to be quite a parent model. It's going to be kind of weird. So let's look at each operation. The mutation, we're going to start with some, say, random vertex or some given vertex. In this case, I'm just going to say G. We'll just pick out of the remaining ones some vertex that isn't G. So I just happen to randomly pick I. Then we're going to reverse the subsection in between those two and bring them together. So that's the mutation. It's pretty simple. It's very reminiscent of two-op swap. The idea is this is just a random exploration of possible tours. So we have one tour, we can flip some section of it around. Oh, we introduce essentially this new edge between G and I. Hey, we've got a new tour from this. Hopefully it's better. Let's take a look at the crossover operation. It's pretty similar, but it's got a few differences here. We're going to pick, let's say we have this tour on our left is our one we're sort of modifying. We're trying to create new versions of this tour on the left. B is our selected vertex. It was already randomly picked or is, given from a previous round. What we're going to do is pick another whole tour out of the population. So that's what this is on the right. We look up B in this other one. We find the vertex adjacent to it. And then we bring them together. We again apply that reverse operation, or reversing that subsequence to produce a new tour that has sort of qualities of both. So the prefix is the same. Yeah, a lot of this is the same though reversed, and then this is copied over from the other. So that's crossing over. So we're kind of sort of pulling in the qualities of this other tour into our new baby tour. So big picture, again, for each member of our population, we're going to apply some random number of mutations and crossovers, and we're going to pick between those two operations randomly also. We'll generate, for each member of the population, a kid, let's say. And if the kid is better than its parent, then the kid replaces its parent in the population. So that's, I don't know what dystopian future that falls into, but yeah, that's so if a kid is strictly better than its parents, then it improves. Otherwise, the parent gets to live on for another generation. So again, not exactly like biology here, but hey, the motivation, if you look in the paper, is it's trying to preserve sort of the diversity of the population. It wants to have if you're exploring the space, you want to have a bunch of sort of a distant set of points out in that space, if you will. Each member of the population is like way out in a different sort of corner, hopefully, of this, and it starts borrowing. As each one sort of finds better aspects, they start kind of swapping those pieces together, hopefully. Then you repeat this whole process for a fixed number of times, like, or generations, you could say. This is a bit of a deviation from the original paper. I find this works a lot better than some of the other end conditions they suggest. So we're just going to go with that. Let's take a look at the pseudocode. It's a bit daunting, but I'll kind of walk you through it. We have a few parameters here. The graph is, of course, the graph. We have size. This can be the size of our population. That's sort of something we can control, the accuracy of our method with, potentially. There's this float, this value p is supposed to be a probability, and then iterations. And we should have called that generations next time. So we're going to create an initial collection of tours of the given population size. So that means we might have 10, 12, 100, I don't know, tours sitting around, all just randomly created. Then for a fixed number of iterations or generations, we're going to go through each tour in the population. We'll start off by copying the initial tour. Again, in Scala, this will be fantastic. You won't really need to do this if you're using immutable data structures. Gotta plug Scala when I can. But hey, we'll pick one city at random as sort of our start. And I'm setting a flag here now for we're going to apply a random number of alterations or operations on this sort of child tour, that's new tour. So we go into this while loop. This is essentially flipping a biased coin. So random's going to return a number in between 0 and 1. So it's going to, and if it's, this is just a way of saying, well, if p is, say, 0.2, this will give us a 20% chance of entering into this block. So that of the statement being true, we enter into here. And this is our mutation operation. So we're going to just take new tour, remove start city from it just temporarily, or for just this operation, and pick any other city out of the tour besides it. That'll be our end city. Otherwise, we're going to pick another random tour out of the population itself. So we're going to eliminate sort of the parent tour from the population for this selection. So we pick another tour out. Now we do that operation where for our start city, we look up which city is adjacent to in the other tour. That will be our end. So now at the end of this if, we have end city is, randomly picked either via mutation or from sort of borrowed from another tour. Now, this is the sort of odd end condition for the kid. If the start city is adjacent to the end city in the new tour, so if they're already next to each other, however we picked end city, if it's already next to start city, so they're right next to each other, this one's at index 4 and this one's at index 5, then we're done. We're going to stop making modifications to the kid. The kid's complete. If that isn't true, we're going to do that reversal, right? So now we have the start and end city in the new tour. We're going to reverse the subsection. We're going to leave the start city in its place. We're going to start the next one on either side of it up to the end and swap it. So reverse that subsequence. So now we've sort of moved start city and end city right next to each other. We're going to advance start city is now going to be equal to whatever end city we picked. So this means, and then we'll repeat. What this is trying to do is we're going to alter some subsequence out of the new tour. So if whatever the initial tour was, after doing this and then moving on to the next one, after making that modification, we've hopefully, say, modified some portion, contiguous portion. So let's say we've modified, the values that, or, like indexes 2, 3, and 5, and then we happen to have start and end right next to each other at 5 and 6 already, so we just quit. So ideally that means we take some initial tour, we're going to alter some random section of it, and now after we've done that, we compare the new tour, sort of the kid, to its parent. If it's better, then we replace tour with the new tour in the population. And then we repeat for the next tour. We keep doing this for a fixed number of generations. And then finally, we just return the best one overall after all that time has passed. So the analysis for this is really sort of flimsy, I guess. That's always the criticism of genetic algorithms is, something's happening. What's happening? Who knows? So the idea here is with a population, a bunch of random changes, hopefully it can sort of jump out of bad local optima. Like the greedy algorithm will keep improving until it hits like a local minima, right? And then we'll just stay there. But hopefully with this, you can sort of jump out, right? Because you have a whole bunch of tours as your population, and you're kind of randomly moving around rather than deterministically. The key thing is whatever sort of stumbles upon, it's going to keep, and it's always going to improve. So it's never going to replace a tour with a worse tour. So the population should improve over time, though not necessarily through each generation. So that's why it's good to just do a fixed number of generations. It kind of forces it. Sometimes it'll stagnate for many generations and then break through and make a bunch of changes, and then it'll stagnate again. So there's a bunch of weird stochastic properties that are really hard to predict. The crossover operation tends to propagate, if you will, good qualities throughout the population. Again, it's just a tendency. It's really hard to predict how much and when. A lot of people sort of try to study this, but it's not really obvious. But overall, there's no guarantees, right? It's just us flipping a bunch of coins and keeping the best things we see. Also, unlike, say, the primality test algorithm, which the longer you run it, you can be guaranteed your confidence just goes up and up and up and up because the probability of a false positive just keeps dropping and dropping. It's not a clear exchange in this one between time and accuracy. You think more generations, yeah, you're probably going to get a better answer. Not necessarily. If you add 1 more, 10 more, 5 more, 100 more generations. And also, the mathematical relationship between the exchange of time and accuracy isn't precise. Not like primality, right? Where you're how much you're going to improve. You can calculate, if I do 10 more times, this is my chance of a false positive versus, what I'm at now. Whereas this is just sort of a hope. It's like, well, maybe if I run it longer, I'll get a better answer, but maybe not. It's hard to say. Overall, this paper, its method is decent. It's hard. We've tried to reproduce it like many, many times at this point. It works. It's maybe not as good as purported, but it's interesting to study and fiddle with. So that's what you'll be doing. And then finally, I just want to comment on, does this connect to human evolution or, biological evolution or something like that? So there's a few key, does this prove evolution or something like that? There's a few key differences between this algorithm and biological evolution, let's say. One of the big differences, if not where this is not really analogous between the two, is the notion of fitness. So in the algorithm, we're always keeping, strictly speaking, improvement. So child is better than its parent. We can measure that with tour length, right? So you just measure how expensive is the tour. We know exactly is this tour better than its parent? And we can just make that decision. Versus biological fitness is a bit fuzzier. It's not as exact. It's not immediately known. And it's not as precisely known in this. And there's no guarantee in biological evolution that, a child is more fit than its parents or something like that. Also, in biological evolution, the idea of fitness is really contextualized, right? So you could say, have a person who's, really muscular and athletic. They have an advantage, in terms of fitness, of propagating their genes because they survive in some scenario. But maybe in a different setting, that increased muscle mass means increased metabolism, which makes them more prone to starve or something like that. So fitness is very contextual in biological settings. So that's actually a really big difference. Also, there in the original paper, there's evidence of, well, as you increase the graph size, the quality of your answers compared to the known optimal drops. And that makes sense because as you expand the graph, the space of all possible tours, that n factorial starts to grow rapidly. So even though you're moving around in it randomly, at some point, even if you're just sort of hopping, skipping, and jumping around, the space is just so large. Even to sort of randomly explore all of it or all the meaningful parts of it, or it just becomes infeasible. So you have a shrinking probability of jumping to sort of even the optimal region, right, and then making improvements in that region because the whole space is growing so fast. And to me, this is actually one of the biggest critiques of sort of biological human evolution is the human genome is 4 billion nucleotides, which are those letters A, C, T, G. So the space of all possible humans is 4 billion factorial, which is really beyond an astronomical size number. So all the people who've ever lived and will ever live potentially is just not going to make a dent in that number. So we're not going to explore the space of all possible people. That being said, that space also includes a lot of non-viable, people, right? So in that space of all possible, genetic structures, we have people with no lungs, we have people whose brainstem is upside down or something like that. Just people who can't live because the genetics, imply a biological structure or body that just doesn't work. What that means is we have a huge space with all these sort of discontinuities. You can, it's not, to me, when they say, oh, okay, you can have this species and after a few, mutations and changes and improvements, etc., you end up with this other one. That sort of slow sort of stair step from one to the other, that's something I think you don't really get for free as an argument. And to me, the space is so discontinuous, meaning it's very likely there's, if you take a person and a small edits away, you end up with a non-viable person, right? So it's very easy to expect, well, as you move this sort of population of genetics from one spot to another in that space of all possible, people or animals or whatever, that, the fact that there's small steps that are viable along the way, not even improvements in terms of fitness, but just in terms of, we can make small edits and make it from one thing all the way to the other. And then from this to that and to another animal is, I think, really hand wavy and not very clear. And I think it's definitely, at least, you could say, oh, okay, maybe I'm coming at it from a religious point of view. I think even from a strictly materialist point of view, there has to be additional constraints on biological evolution for it to make any sense. There has to be some other guiding process. There has to be some other reason, something constraining the space of all possible people, if you're talking about the human genome or the space of all possible dogs or cats or whatever. You can make a similar argument, I've heard, on the protein level, that amino acids make up proteins. The proteins we observe in nature are a small fraction of the space of all possible proteins, and we have no idea why that is. Um, so I think there's some really sort of questionable mathematics there, but I think when you question it, you get very dogmatic responses. So from my point of view as a religious person, actually I don't really care if human evolution is true or not, which sounds really strange, but like I don't base my personal faith on whether one scientific theory is true or not. I think that's sort of a shaky ground for judging how to live, because science, the positive quality of it's the fact that it's under constant revision, right? So what you think might have been true might turn out not to be. So, so for the questions of how to live and what's right in that sense, I think, I personally don't look at the science there really at all. Um, I could talk about that more in a different video. But to me, evolution is honestly it's like having olives on a pizza. Like I don't really, I can take it or leave it. I don't care if it's there. I don't care if it's gone. It doesn't matter to me either way. I'm still eating pizza. And by pizza I mean, I guess if pizza is like a metaphor for the nature of truth or how to live, how to correctly navigate life. Yeah, I'm still doing it. It doesn't matter if evolution's true or not. I could see religiously it working or not working. It to me it just doesn't impact my personal faith at all. Um, I could also sort of accept it's there. Also, um, there's this kind of far out idea of like, well, the ideas you believe, the values you have, your beliefs, these are really kind of like memes passed from like parent to child, and like those ideals and beliefs you have shape your life, and it shapes your kids' life, and it shapes whole population's life, and that those ideas are actually just as influential and impactful as a source of information, just as impactful as genetics are as a source of information regarding life. That's kind of like a Jordan Peterson-esque way of looking at it. I think that's kind of interesting. I don't know if that's true or not. Obviously, to me, there's just a lot of questions. There's probably nothing more complex than the interaction between the environment, your genetics, and your sort of psychology, however you want to look at that. And as we sort of dig into these topics deeper, it just becomes more and more complex too, because now we've realized, oh, there's something called epigenetics, which means that's all the stuff that influences genetics, but it's not explicitly coded in your DNA, which turns out to be a lot of things, a lot of environmental factors you inherit. So there's there's a lot to this. To me, what's definitely true about this is I don't think, because if this algorithm works for finding optimal tours or near optimal tours or something like that in a graph, I don't think that really proves anything about biology necessarily. But I think it's also I just want to throw it out, I think it's pretty reasonable to skeptical about some of the claims um, in biological evolution. I'm going to link to a video below from Stanford. I think it's pretty good, discusses a lot of these issues. So hopefully you find that interesting and useful. Yeah, thanks for listening.